My mother took me to visit her friend when I was 8 years old. This friend lived alone in an old house. I was exploring the house and went upstairs where all the bedrooms were. As I got to the top of the stairs, I looked to the far end of the hall and I saw an old man standing there. He saw me, but he was looking through me. Very difficult to describe. I knew instantly that something wasn't right because the lower half of his body was not really defined. I raced down the stairs to tell my mother and the friend that told her yes, that is the ghost of the house and he's harmless. I have never forgotten the creepy feeling that I had. My dad's house was built where the original house was flattened in a tornado. I slept upstairs. Next to my bed was a vent where you could see down into the basement if you looked over the edge of the bed. Sometimes I would wake up at like 3 a.m. I'd look down and I'd see a bright light on in the basement. It's unfinished in the basement. All the bedrooms are on the main level. I'd go to the bathroom and the light in the basement would have turned off. Could be in my head, right? Same house. I had a lamp that would flash sometimes. It's a touch lamp, so maybe it had issues. But it had 3 brightness setting lamps. Each touch it would get brighter until the 4th touch it would turn off. I couldn't ever get the light to just flash once and turn off, no matter how fast I tapped it. It would take a second to register the next touch. So about 3 to 4 seconds to rifle through the 3 light setting to the off setting. It only flashed at night, too. One night that really convinced me I wasn't imagining it all. My big stereo system, when turned on, would always start at a low sound level, even if you had it cranked up when you shut it off. About 3 a.m. one night, the stereo turned on, full volume, when I was sound asleep. It was so loud it woke everyone up in the house. They came into my room and was like, WTF was that? After I woke up in total fear. Waking up to that loud radio, total darkness, was a fear I've never felt before and haven't since. My house is haunted, I think. When I was 11, I was staying with some friends at their cabin deep in the woods, in the middle of rural nowhere, like literally not another house for miles. We were playing soccer, and my friend yelled and pointed to the trees behind the yard. We all saw a man standing there in a dirty brown shirt and jeans, who walked towards us and vanished behind a tree. We screamed for their dad, and he came running to see what was going wrong, and told us to go inside while he looked around. He didn't find anything, and we didn't want to go outside and play again. Later that night, we pretty much calmed down. We were watching TV in their room, which had big glass sliding doors facing the forest, when their dog started growling and barking at something outside the glass doors. He had never acted like this before, so we called their dad again, and he went outside through the doors and found nothing again, but the dog wouldn't stop barking a few minutes later. I have no idea what the F we saw, but I never went up with them again. I remember it so clearly. I had bunk beds with my brother as a kid, but we moved into a bigger house that allowed us to each have our own room, so we split them up. Mine was the top half, meaning I basically had 2 footboards and no headboard. The tops of the posts were flat and were about ear height on me, so I sat on the edge of the bed. I decided to put my stereo speakers pointing inward on them. I sat down dead center on the bed, listened to Motley Crue, and leaned forward to rest my elbows on my knees and hold my head for a minute as I was losing myself in the music. Then something heavy and sharp hit the top left back of my head hard enough that I started bleeding profusely. I leapt from my bed, holding my scalp, blood dripping the whole way down the hall. Stairs, my mother in the kitchen. She helped me get the bleeding under control. We went to the emergency room where the doctor stapled my scalp back together. When we got home from the emergency room, my mom and I went up to the bedroom to figure out what the hell happened. One of the speakers on the side, my right side, was on the floor in front of my bed with blood on the corner. There was no way it could have hit me in the head by just falling off the post. Never mind where and how hard it hit me. We were never able to explain that one. I have a hard time sleeping in a room for a while after it. A few years later, the sconce on the wall started flickering, flashed green, and went out. That was probably just a weird bulb issue. Still freaking considered I'm still in a haunted room that tried to brain me. My sister and I were playing with a Ouija board, asking all the important questions about boys we liked, etc. My father was in the room and scoffed that one of us was moving the planchette thing to spell out the answers. So he asked us a question that we couldn't know the answer to. Ask it, what is Stubbs' middle name? We had a family friend who lived in another state, and although his given name was Robert, everyone called him Stubb. As little kids, we wouldn't have known his middle name. We asked, and the planchette spelled out Emil, E-M-I-L. And Emil was the right answer. My father made us immediately throw out the Ouija board. When I was a child, I had what we always believed to be an imaginary friend. He was a little older than I was, probably about 8 or 9, and Native American. I'm pretty sure he was Seneca. He would tell me stories, and we would play games together. As an adult, I never really thought much about it until my nephew was born. He and my brother lived with my parents for a bit while he was quite young, about the same age I was when I had the imaginary friend. He too had a friend who told him the same stories and played the same games. The part that made us all realize there was more to it was when my 4-year-old nephew apologized for not being able to protect me from a bad guy, an older boy in the neighborhood who would climb through my bedroom window. I woke up and I saw a shadow man run, then jump at me while I was in bed. I was so struck with fear, I was unable to move, but he disappeared right before he landed. The memory was so terrifying, I still remember it 30 years later. I only recently, like a month ago, discovered that this was a sleep paralysis demon. When I was 13, 14, I was at Wing Sun lesson, and I was the only kid there among adults. While our Saifu demonstrated some movements we were supposed to train, he accidentally hit my glasses without frame. They fell, and one of the glasses cracked, like nearly in half. Enough that when you twisted it a little, there was a gap. Everyone came and tried to help, but there was obviously nothing they could do from bending the temple stem. So we put the glasses on the table and continued. After the lesson, I went to the table to grab my broken glasses, and I didn't see the crack anymore. My Saifu came over and apologized again, talking about insurance and that I shouldn't worry too much. I showed him the glasses. He too looked quite confused, and a few others who were still around joined. Everyone was kind of speechless, and the glasses were passed around. They slowly started to laugh it off and said that I'm lucky. That's it. Wasn't really mentioned anymore the following lessons, like it never happened. While this isn't really a typical paranormal creepy story, it is an unusual story worth telling, and people tend to say I probably dreamt it and just shrug it off. I still think about it often as an adult, and I've just accepted that it's happened. My mom's grandpa, they called him Shorty, was her favorite. Well, he passed away, and sometime later, my sister was born, extremely premature. My mom swears she saw Grandpa Shorty sitting in a chair next to my sister, smiling. Doctor said my sister wouldn't make it. Well, Grandpa Shorty had a pocket watch with a crystal glass cover, and it cracked and stopped working the day he died. The day my sister was born, it cracked again and started working. My mom still has this watch, and my sister is celebrating her daughter's first birthday this year. I was coming back on a plane from a very important job interview, and I thought I blew it. I was spacing out during the entire flight, and when the plane landed, I finally got up to grab my bags, and an older woman 3 aisles down from me looked straight at me and said, "Don't worry, it'll be okay. You'll get it." I reflexively thanked her and ignored what she said, but a few hours later, I got a call that I got the job. Only then did I remember what she said. I still don't know why she said that and how she knew what my problem was. Back in 1997, I was aged 8. I shared a room with my younger brother who was 4 at the time. We used to have our grandparents over for dinner most nights. It wasn't uncommon for them to stay long after we'd gone to bed. They would come and kiss us goodnight in bed when they were going to leave. This one summer's day, I woke up during the night and saw my granddad. It wasn't unusual, like I said. I said, "Hey, Granddad, are you leaving now?" He came and sat on my bed and said, "Yes, I'm saying goodbye for now." He kissed me, then went and sat on my brother's bed, kissed him as well. Then he left. My childhood intuition picked up that he was a bit sad. Next morning, I went to the kitchen to find my mom crying. She told me that my granddad died last night of a sudden heart attack. I said, "How can that be? I saw him last night. He came and said goodbye to me." My mom said that grandparents left shortly after I went to bed. I also remember my grandpa said goodbye and not goodnight. It was quite a shock, but at the same time a little comforting too. I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but this is a memory that I won't forget. I was walking in the woods by the sea in southern England. I came across a rock formation that had a sign, "The Wishing Seat." It was rather like a giant throne, although obviously natural, not man-made. I sat on it and entirely frivolously made a wish. As sitting on it, a young family passed along the path in front of me, a man, woman, boy, and a girl, all very ordinary in dress and appearance, but strikingly beautiful. So the following year, I was walking along the path again, but a different month, different time of day. Came across the wishing seat again and sat on it. The same family passed by again. The world is full of coincidences, some significant and some not, but this seemed a rather long coincidence. This story is hard to explain, but I still get shivers when I think of it. He was a customer I was helping out. Honestly, there was nothing that stood out with him. He was handsome, but in a normal way. He dressed normal, talked normal, was blandly friendly, as you are with strangers. Just a normal, upper middle class type of guy. The only thing that really stood out was his blue eyes. Not in a goofy, supernatural way. He just had very, very blue eyes. But for some reason, he made every hair on the neck stand on end. Alarm bells were going off in my head like crazy. All I wanted to do was hide. I've never felt this way before or since. Even when I was followed home by someone, I've never felt such a deep gut feeling of "you are in danger" as I did with this guy. After ringing him through, he reached out to shake my hand. This is not common at all here, but out of politeness I took and shook. I instantly got so nauseous I almost gagged. The moment I got nauseous, he just held my hand and smiled, and something in the smile made me absolutely sure he knew what I was feeling, and he enjoyed it. Not religious in any way, but I remember thinking in a moment, "Oh, is that the devil?" After he left, I was still so sick feeling I had to go back and sit down. Not sure if he was a serial killer or what, but to this day I have never experienced something even that close to the encounter. I absolutely felt bone-deep certainty that I was in some sort of danger. I felt every bit of the prey. It's a hard story to explain, but it's all based on feelings, so I haven't had that many people about it. But to this day, it's absolutely one of the scariest and weirdest things I've ever experienced. I live in a small town with very few black people around in Central Europe. I was pretty down because of a girl and went for a kebab. While I was standing in a queue for a kebab, in the pub right next to it, there was a woman that caught my attention. Because two things. Initially, because of her race, that's just uncommon to see there. Another, for a fact that I've never seen her before, despite living in a small town my entire life and going around this pub every day. Another thing I noticed is she didn't order anything. She just sat there by the table alone. I ordered my food, and while waiting for it, the woman leaned over the fence that separates kebab place from the pub, looking directly at me, and offered me an ice cream. I accepted the offer, and immediately after that, she looked me in the eyes, smiled a bit, and clearly calmly said, "I love you." Then as I received my kebab, I turned around where she was, and she was gone, vanished as quickly as she appeared. I inspected the ice cream, and it seemed okay. The package was, in fact, it was delicious. It was unknown, but a very kind stranger just gave me ice cream and said "I love you" when I most needed it, and vanished. There was a young woman about my age at the time, early 20s, sitting alone, nearly empty coffee shop. She seemed like she was trying not to cry, so I went over and asked if I could sit with her. We talked for hours about everything and nothing at the same time. She didn't go into detail about what was going on with her, but she felt like there was no hope. I did my best to encourage her, told her not to give up, tried to give her reasons to hold on, thought of ideas that might give her some hope. The coffee shop was closing. I wrote my phone number down and told her I would love to hang out with her again. She could call any time. She looked at me and told me everything I said to her wasn't for her to hear. It was for me. I hadn't told her that I was in fact suicidal. I had originally gone to the coffee shop to think about how to best end my life. While talking to her, I figured if I could maybe help someone else not feel the same way I do, I wouldn't kill myself. At least not yet. She not only saved my life that day, but gave my whole life a new purpose filled with hope. I'm a therapist now, and I help people all day. She hugged me and walked out the door. Ran after her because she forgot the napkin with my number on it. I was no more than 2 seconds behind her. I got outside, and there was no one there. One evening in winter, I didn't leave work till almost 7 p.m., so I was walking home and thought, F it, I'll cut through the park to get home quicker, even though it's poorly lit. A couple minutes into the park, I could hear a group of people behind me and in front of me. I was thinking, F, I'm going to be jumped. Up there ahead was a lamppost with the CCTV camera, so I thought I'll stop there, at least get jumped on camera. As I stood beneath the light, this really tall woman jogged over and stopped next to me. I'm 6 feet tall and she was way taller than me. She asked, "Is it okay if I walk with you?" I was like, "Sure, okay, I guess." She walked with me to the edge of the park, talking about dodgy park at night. As soon as we got to the edge of the park, she told me have a good night and then jogged back in. It was a really weird experience. I feel certain I would have been mugged or something if she wasn't there. I walked through the park every day for about a year. Never saw her again. I'm a truck driver, and sometimes I pick up loads from a lot of old, creepy as-F places. I was in a super old building in a tiny little town in Virginia. While I'm waiting for my trailer to get loaded, I went inside to use the bathroom. Now, this place is super old, built in the 1860s. The bathroom door didn't have a working latch, so instead there was a hook and loop style latch to keep the door closed. The hook was pretty stiff to get into the loop and actually had to be forced into place. I've got my back to the door while doing my business, and there's one loud knock on the door, like someone had struck it with the bottom of a balled fist. I give the obligatory, "Yo, someone's in here." No interruptions after that. But as I finish up, turn on the sink, the door flies open. Not a damn soul in sight. The hook and loop are both still securely screwed into their retrospective places in the door and frame. Upon returning to the door, my loaded trailer, I asked the guy operating the forklift if he had knocked on the door, and would you prize? No. I asked if there was anyone else down there again. He replies, nope. I shrug it off. It was until we climb into the truck to go back into the scrapyard to get my paperwork, and he yells something along the lines of, you handled that pretty well. There's a reason I'm the only one who comes here to load trucks. Turns out my account was far from the first of people having strange experiences in that building. I was in grade school, and a distant relative passed away. I was asked to make a slideshow with pictures of her that my grandma gave me to her funeral. I was at home alone playing on the computer rather than working on a slideshow. USB thumb drive with the photos on it was on the living room table about 10 feet from me on the computer desk. I get a text from my mom asking how the slideshow's going. I hesitated to reply and thought to myself, I should probably start working on it already. Next thing I know, the thumb drive hits my computer monitor, actually moving it slightly. It lands in my lap. I'm home alone, all by myself and frozen in fear. Making that slideshow was very uncomfortable after that. In one of my childhood homes, we had a foosball table in the basement. We would go down there to go on the computer. I remember going back upstairs, going to turn the lights off, and witnessing 2 poles in the foosball table, spinning uncontrollably. When I was a kid, probably about 8, I visited the Kenilworth Castle with my family. I remember very clearly seeing a man watching over from a piece of the ruined castle. He was wearing a navy robe with a gold rope tie at the waist. He had ginger hair and looked very angry. I distinctly remember that. Not me being a kid, I was a bit confused as to why he just stood there, especially because pieces of the castle are barred off due to the walkways having collapsed or just made unsafe for the public to cross. So I turned to my mom, telling her about the man and asking what he was doing, but by the time she looked and I turned back, he had disappeared. My auntie, standing over my son's crib, she looked at me and smiled. She died 10 years before that. A friend and I were fishing in Alaska on a river, and there were a lot of people there. As the day wore on, people drifted away and went home until it reached a point that it was only he and I there. We were, I'm guessing, 50 yards away from each other. I got a feeling like I was being watched. I skimmed the tree line and saw nothing. After fishing a bit, I moved close to my friend, and we were talking, and I noticed he was looking around, over his shoulder. Finally, he said, I know this sounds silly, but for the last 20 minutes, I feel like we've been watched. Then he asked, you want to go home? We couldn't seem to get out of there fast enough. Looked over my shoulder the whole time we were heading back to the car. Something was running outside my tent in Flat Rock, Alabama, location known for Sasquatch and boogers. My father swears up and down this happened, but I was not there to confirm it because it happened years before I was born. His older sister, my aunt, had some time with friends during a sleepover. They were doing a seance for funsies. My dad, then a teenager, decided to F with them by opening and slamming doors and making noises. They eventually tried to call on the spirit of Beethoven. In an adjacent room, my father dramatically slammed on the keys of the piano. You know, one of those portable electric ones? And at that point, they realized they were being F with. Went to the other room to confront him. They had a laugh. He headed back out to the living room where they had been in. One of the girls followed him. He said he saw a shadowy figure in a reclining chair. It looked at him, nodded, and vanished before his eyes. He was ready to chalk it up to seeing things when the girl behind him asked if he saw that too. We were having a sleepover at my buddy Matt's house, and he had a closet that was deep and went over the stairs into his sister's wall. His sister had friends over and was doing seances and calling on ghosts. We began knocking on the wall and they were screaming like crazy. Wild. When my grandfather, Papa, passed away 4 years ago, as he was laying in the hospital bed passing on, my mom, my uncle, and my nana were the only ones there, and they said Papa kept saying, "The turkey. Don't forget about the turkeys." We all thought it was just him passing on, saying nonsense since it was like a week from Thanksgiving. But then, at the wake, we went to the funeral home, and there was a flock of turkeys right outside the entrance. We were all super creeped out. And later, the next year, when the headstone we ordered was finally put up, we went to see it, and my nana said she liked the plot because it was as if he was looking over the wildflowers in front of it. And when we left the cemetery, there was one lone turkey in the wildflowers. I was probably 12, staying over a buddy's house. His dad was a cop and very reclusive. So as much as I hung out at their house, I had only seen him on a handful of times and never really engaged with him. We had a spot in the basement where we played Nintendo. To our left was the furnace, the workshop room. His dad usually stayed upstairs, not in the living room, usually the parents' bedroom, I suppose. So when I saw him standing in the furnace room at the workbench, I'll never forget, he was wearing a flannel that was red. I was shocked to see him look at me and grin slightly. My natural reaction was to look away, and a second or two later, when I carelessly looked back, he was gone. I didn't think anything of it later on. Upstairs, he asked his mom where his dad is. She says, "Oh, he's off at work." I said, "No, he isn't. He's just downstairs at the workbench." Buddy and his mom fell silent. Mom asked what he was wearing. I replied, "A red flannel." My buddy was petrified. The mom visibly shaken. It's not until years later I realized I'd seen a ghost. Neither mom nor son elaborated on it. Shortly after, we went to junior high where I found new friends and kind of lost touch with the buddy. The end. Me and my friend were walking home from a party, and we passed a generally abandoned campground. We heard a dog barking, which was unusual since it was 1 a.m. The bark sounded weird, though. It kept persisting until we both realized what it actually was. It was a guy imitating a dog's bark. We heard insanely aggressive crunches coming from the woods, so we booked it back to my friend's house. I was bathing my son in our old house. The missus was out and about, so there was nobody else in the house. If anyone was to come in the house, I would have heard the front door go. I was sat at the end of the bath by the door, and I heard a knock on the door, which was right by my head. It made me jump because it was so close and loud. My son immediately perked up thinking it was his mama. It didn't occur to me at the time that she wouldn't have knocked on the door because I communicated beforehand that I was bathing him anyway. I said, "All right, babe," to which there was no reply. So I opened the door immediately, and there was no one there. So I shut the door within a second of shutting it. Knock, knock, knock. Harder this time. So I opened the door right on the end of the third knock. Not a soul in the house. By this time, my son was confused and really worried. Naturally, I played it down, said it was Mom playing a trick, while my heart was nearly bursting out of my chest. Scary crap. Fall, 1988. My parents built a brand new house in a brand new subdivision on the edge of suburbia, bordered farmland. One evening, I was sitting in my room doing homework. My sister was in a room next to mine. My folks were downstairs, all quiet, about 5 p.m. or so, still bright out, no windows open. My 13-year-old sister, 2 years older than me, comes flying in my room all freaked out and said something strange just happened in her room. I followed her back, but she stayed in the hall initially. She pointed at her dresser, a solid wood thing about 4 feet high, completely level. There was some odds and ends stuff on top of the dresser, including a can of Aqua Net aerosol hairspray. She said it moved across her dresser by itself. I picked it up and placed it about 12 inches to the left and stepped back. It began to tremble a bit in place and slid in a quick, smooth motion to where it was when I picked it up. We both freaked out. I picked it up and repeated the action a few more times, maybe 4. It moved the same way each time, then it stopped and would not repeat. We ran downstairs and told our parents. They would not listen and could have cared less. A family member died while hospitalized as we, the family, were saying our goodbyes. The nurse came in, shut off the monitors, and left us to give us time to breathe. The hospital window flew open 5 minutes into our grieving. There were no storms, there was no air movement, dispersed air pressure in the room, nothing. Nothing stood against the window, nor was anything pushing against it. Furthermore, I worked in this hospital and knew these windows were bolted to prevent jumpers. We all just stared at each other, looked back at the deceased family member, and then my cousin quietly closed the window. I used to go explore caves and abandoned mines with my brother and his friends when I was in middle and high school. There was one day that we visited a mine. It was hard to get into. We had driven for a long time to get there. I had hardly slept. It was dark. Almost immediately after going past this gate was a setup in front of it. Everyone else had walked ahead of me, and I was getting really nervous, using a crappy flashlight to see where I was stepping and to avoid bits of snow near the entrance and a little bit of water and rocks. Honestly, just worried at first about spraining an ankle or something. Anyways, I get maybe 100 feet into this mine, and everyone else is fairly far ahead of me, heading downwards, and the darkness of the cave was getting to me. It had never bothered me before, but it was so smothering it. I felt like it was substance, and I was breathing it in. I was panicking a bit. I heard someone whisper into my ear. I said F this and yelled at everyone else that I was not going any further. Went back out to the car. They were gone for another 30 minutes or so before they came back, which I was glad about since I was calming myself down. I'm a paramedic and had just put a car accident victim in a body bag with decapitation from driving under a truck's rear trailer. The coroner gave us the okay to load him up. He was wearing a heavy jacket and sweater, so we just stuck him in the bag and began to load him. After we got underway to the morgue, I heard a noise and this guy was thrashing around in the body bag violently. I was out of my mind. This guy had 90% of his head missing. We pulled over and my partner, who didn't see it, goes back and opens the bag while I was about to piss myself. All of a sudden, a very small chihuahua jumped out and ran up to my partner. He must have been in the guy's jacket pocket or had been knocked out and just quiet until we got underway. Took me the rest of the shift to relax after that. 32 years in EMS, and I've never seen anything like that happen to me. One night, my friend and I were doing LSD during a blood moon eclipse. We were laying in my grass in my backyard, and some giant creature approached us from the forest. I think it was the rake, or maybe Bigfoot. I moved to a new town, and my new commute took me on a road overlooked by this massive condo community. The first time I passed by, this one house just fell off. As you drove by, it radiated the sense that it was watching you with malice. Completely illogical. But it puts up with my hackles every time, and it's always the same condo that did it. Later, I found out that an old woman was murdered there by a family member. Horrific story. I drove down the street and verified the address, and also that there was nothing identifiable about this particular condo. The place was cookie cutter to its neighbors, down to the landscaping and the blinds. When friends would visit, I'd joke and ask if they could tell us which one was the murder house. They all guessed correctly, but no one could figure out why. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often, they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least, that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and two little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gone away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was one big alligator and two small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here.
Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!
The flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.